Gail Dines did a TED Talk. Gail fucking Dines. Or rather, Gail no fucking Dines, since she's an anti-pornography activist. And I say TED Talk, but I mean a TEDx talk. That's like TED Light. All of the pomposity, none of the fact-checking or credibility. If you don't know who Gail Dines is, lucky you, keep it that way. She is a living cartoon of the shocked, mumsy, overweight sort of middle-class, white, sex-negative feminists who rule the roost these days, and at least in the UK are influencing government. Gail is, sadly, quite influential, and her pro-censorship activism and advice has helped shape government policy here in the UK, including the disastrous autofilter of the internet. Autofiltering always goes wrong. The ban on extreme porn that leaves what qualifies as extreme porn rather nebulous, and the ban on producing porn in the UK that involves such innocuous acts as face-sitting and female ejaculation. She believes pornography is a public health issue, and that has certain, largely unspecified, negative effects on young men and their relationships with women, because, obviously, it only matters because it might impact on women. You probably don't really understand what the porn situation in the UK has been, but to give you some idea, hardcore pornography was illegal, entirely, until 2002, when, figuring the horse had already not only bolted but fucked everything, thanks to the internet, the government relaxed the rules. So anyway, she did this faux TEDx talk, which is a shocking parade of ignorance, and this is my reply. Dines asserts that we live in a pornified culture. Though she never quite goes into what this means, she seems to conflate glamour, porn, fashion and advertising into one single many-headed hydra, as though it were one single thing and there were no matters of degree. She doesn't seem to recognise that we live in a pluralistic media landscape in which many different media messages exist, and in which popularity and efficacy, rather than sinister motives, will determine how images and content are chosen. Hell, her influence, vastly disproportionate to her scholarship or facts, demonstrates that this assertion simply isn't true. What she has is apophenia, false pattern recognition. She sees porn everywhere. Perhaps the problem is that she has a dirty mind. Gail thinks this porn affects gender and sexual identity. This is kind of like thinking that food chooses you at the buffet table rather than you choosing the food. Well, perhaps she thinks that the cheesecake forces itself upon her or something, who knows. One quote Dines thinks is particularly damning comes from a pornography producer, saying that girls are coming to the set porn ready. Gail, of course, thinks this is horrific, but might there not be another interpretation, not only for girls but for boys? I grew up in that transitional period from pre-internet to the current age, in my teens from around 1988 through to 1994, the dawn of the internet. If you saw porn at all, it was either someone's softcore stash, stolen, recovered from a hedge, or if you saw anything remotely hardcore, it was something someone had smuggled in from Europe at great risk. Internet porn was a fucking revelation, let me tell you, and an eye-opener into what sex could be and just how broad and deep and different human sexuality can be. Anonymity and the free availability of it has allowed people to become aware of and to explore their sexuality and turn-ons without judgment, and that is, to my mind, a massively positive thing. When we think about people being isolated in terms of their sexuality, we might think of homosexuals and other off-brand sexualities as being the ones that get the most value out of this, but I think ordinary men and women are also benefiting from a chance to see just how big human sexuality can be. And, of bloody course, a girl who wants to work in porn will have done her research. She's likely to have watched and enjoyed porn, and of course she'll know what's expected of her because of that. Just because she knows what's wanted of her in that context doesn't mean that this is a universal. Sex is a negotiation, something Dines doesn't seem to understand either. We want to be pleased, and we also want to please our partners. Our own personal tastes, kinks and limits will get fuzzy around the edges when dealing with people we love. We make sacrifices. We accept gifts from our lovers. If a girl's boyfriend wants to come on her face and she's okay with that, what's the bloody problem? If she wants to face-sit him and he's okay with that, so what? If either of them wants to get spanked, who bloody cares? Why are any of these things inherently bad? I doubt Dines has actually seen much porn when she describes porn stars as universally being young, white, blonde, pretty and firm. I'm lucky, privileged I suppose you might call it, to have or to have had friends in the adult industries, prostitution, stripping and making pornography. And that admittedly tiny and biased sampling includes black, white, Asian, disabled, older, younger, fit, skinny, buxom and all points in between. Human sexuality is far, far, far broader than the fashion pages would have you believe, and the average BMI of porn stars is much closer to the norm, though still below it, than those found in fashion models. There's porn and adult performers for every single taste, and in terms of diversity, it's way better than mainstream media. Dines also thinks nothing but boobs is allowed to jiggle. I really have no fucking idea where she's going for porn. What does it mean to be a guy in a sexualized culture? It means you're being sold product using various processes that people know works. It's no different to being anyone else in this culture or having any particular weakness by which they can sell you things. Apparently it also means that patronizing pseudo-academics who think you can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy are going to attempt to shame you constantly. Nobody is being forced into anything. They're making informed choices. If porn was as influential as Dines appears to believe, our society might actually be a lot better. It might be more accepting of diverse types of bodies. It might be more accepting of different kinds of people, because that is what we see in porn. Fucking is the great equalizer. Equating porn and sexuality to grooming and paedophilia is so obviously a straw man it's not really even worth addressing. Of course a perpetrator is going to be looking for excuses for things that they've done, and oh, it's society, oh, I watched Emmanuel when I was 7, oh, kids these days dress like whores, you can't tell what age they are. Fucking nonsense, it's their fault, alright? As porn access has gone up, sexual offences have gone down. This is very, very well established in numerous studies. Why does Gail have this obsession with facials? Would it shock her to find out that some women like that? That some women like things that she considers to be degrading? What about the men that do? Would it blow her mind to encounter a gay bottom or a male sub? Why does she think this is a problem at all, and why does she only care about it in the context of girls? If you're going to crusade unwanted on behalf of people who don't want your help in the first place, you could at least do it with a sense of gender parity. Doing anything without consent is bad, of course, but that's a matter of consent, not the act itself. Dines talks about how many people visit porn sites and how much of it contains abuse or degradation, but it's a self-defeating argument, since if porn had this terrible effect on society and the abusive etc. behaviour in it shaped behaviour in the real world, then surely this massive exposure that she goes on about should be reflected in terrible social problems around rape and assault, which simply do not exist. Indeed, the rise of porn access, as I said before, correlates with a plummeting level of sexual abuse, the inverse of what we'd expect, though, of course, correlation is not causation. And still, throughout this talk, she fails to acknowledge the sexuality of women. The anonymity of online porn access suits women far more, and for the same reasons that erotica appeals more to them, or at least some of them. It's relatively anonymous, there's much less chance of being shamed. You're safe, private to explore. Women who admit to accessing online pornography has quadrupled, according to Pew, from 2010 to 2013, from about 2% admitting to accessing online porn to about 8%, and it's likely to have continued upwards since then. It's also likely that this is a drastic understatement. But you don't see Dines talking about that. To her, producing and consuming porn is a male crime that harms women. I'd love to see her say that to Nika Noel's face. Again, I have no fucking idea where Dines gets her porn, because she seems to think putting porn into Google will turn up the kind of stuff that you find in the darker corners of the net. Given that, too much information warning, I like BDSM, rough sex, etc., you'd think that my personalised Google algorithm would turn up much worse stuff than she claims to have found, but if I replicate a supposed search for porn in Google, it's pretty damn near vanilla. Mostly just naked bodies and a bit of vanilla sex. To get to the kind of gagging, throat-fucking and arse-destroying stuff that Dines characterises as being the major and majority material online, you do have to go looking for it. And honestly, so fucking what if you do? Lots of people, men and women, up to 60% or more of women according to various studies, have rough or non-consensual sex fantasies. fantasies. Porn serves every kink, from something more romantic and story-led to something more brutal, and more power to it for the variety. This is fantasy, people know that. Even Cindy Gallop of Make Love Not Porn fame could only offer on her website that compares real sex to porn sex that some people do like this, when talking about any sex act, no matter how outlandish. The idea that there's this sharp, impenetrable divide between porno sex and real sex is hopelessly naive. Alright, maybe it's a bit more athletic and performing for the camera, but the acts themselves, not so much. Imagine for a moment that you are growing up with urges and fantasies that aren't approved of by people like Dines. Feeling isolated, believing that your fantasies mean that you are a potential rapist because you've heard shit like this from people like Dines. Shaming women's sexuality was wrong. Shaming and fearing men's sexuality is also wrong. You don't solve a historical wrong by perpetuating a modern one. So no, Gail, feminists are not men's best friends. Feminists don't seem able to tell reality from fantasy, or to understand that other people can tell reality from fantasy. They want to shame male sexuality and make it seem threatening and dangerous. This isn't a good thing, and that attitude is far more likely to lead to abuse than any amount of porn. It's also likely to make men see themselves in a poor light, to hate themselves. The only thing I can agree with Dines on is the need for better sex education, but I'll be fucked if I'm willing to cede sex education to neo-Puritans like Dines and their ilk, any more than I would be willing to cede it to abstinence-only Christian education. It can seem strange to people that anyone would be willing to stand up for porn, or would be willing to say that it's a good thing. But like blasphemy laws, Muhammad cartoons and so on, pornography is often the canary in the coal mine for the state of free expression in our society as a whole. It turns out that they are coming for our tits after all, and they are not going to stop there. So stand up and be counted. All expression matters, even if you, personally, don't see the aesthetic appeal of a spuff in the chops. Peace out.